We all make mistakes when writing books. The trick is to avoid those mistakes. I'm not talking about spelling and grammar and those kind of mistakes. We have other videos on that. I'm talking about bigger mistakes. Stay tuned and you'll find out what I'm talking about so you can write your book in a flash. Hi, I'm Dan Janal. I've written more than a dozen books, including Write Your Book in a Flash. I'm a ghostwriter, book coach, and developmental editor, and I can help you write your book no matter where you are in the writing process. Now, let's dig in.
Let's look at number one. No outline. An outline keeps you focused. I'm a natural outline writer. I think in outlines. I think in bullet points. I think they're easy to write. It comes very naturally to me. But some people have trouble with outlines, and I can understand that. Perhaps a mind map is better for you. Perhaps writing note cards like you did in high school works better for you. Maybe having colored sticky notes works well for you. That's okay too. All of those are different forms of outlines. The point is the outline keeps you focused. So if you have 10 note cards or 10 sticky notes, and each one talks about a chapter, and then you have other sticky notes with other colors underneath that talk about your stories, your statistics, your case studies, your quotes, your cartoons, your artwork, anything else, diagrams, process visuals, interviews, whatever, all that will help keep you focused. And if you are focused, you will never have writer's block. You will never go to your computer and say, what am I going to write about today? Because you'll be able to see all of those points in your outline and say, oh, okay, I feel really energetic today. I'm going to talk about this case study that I've been putting off for weeks. Or you might have a day when you have really low energy and say, well, I really don't feel like doing anything, but I should do something. I know, I'll just get some quotes from famous people from brainyquote.com, and that'll be my chore for the day. So the outline keeps you focused. And it also means you'll never have that writer's block. So let's look at our second point. No help. Let's face it, entrepreneurs have this creed. I can do it all. I know I suffer from that. Everyone I know suffers from that. And that's why we don't hire VAs to do work for us. That would just be so easy for them to do because, well, I can do that. And that's why we struggle with ClickFunnels or Infusionsoft or some other kind of wicked hard program to figure out. But we try to do it ourselves because, hey, I can do it all. And it just makes a lot more sense to hire an expert or someone who works with Infusionsoft or ThriveCart or WordPress or Wix or some other service to do it because they can do it faster, better, and you don't have to waste your time and your mental energy focused on something that, frankly, you really don't have any desire to learn how to do in the first place. So offload it. You need to get help. You can't do it all. Let's face it, I'm the world's worst proofreader. I will have a typo, and chances are it'll be in the very first word, in the very first paragraph, on the very first page of what I have, and I don't see it. Why? Because we have this bias in our brains. Our brains show us what we think we want to see, so we see it correctly, even though it's wrong. And I have horrible stories about this. I ghost wrote a book with a doctor. I proofread it. He proofread it. His wife proofread it. 2 layers of professional proofreaders read it. We were very happy with it. Then we sent it to our audio voiceover person, and she read it, and she sent back pages where words were missing, where there were typos. And it was just like, it was so embarrassing. So you really can't do it all. And the sooner you admit it, the better. And let's face it, there's some things you just don't have any control over anyway. You can't design a cover for your book. Who made you an artist? You can't draw a circle freehand. What makes you think you can design a cover? Because frankly, there's a lot of psychology that goes into a cover as well. So it's not just having the ability to get some nice clip art and a font and stick it on a cover. There are spacing issues. There are color issues. There are things that pop and there are things that don't pop. And if you're on Amazon and your book doesn't pop, you're not going to make a sale. So why bother doing things that you have no aptitude for? Big problem. Third point, help is less expensive than you think. You know, proofreader is 2, 3, 4 cents a word. It adds up. I'll give you that, but it's a lot less than you probably thought it would be. Plus, the cost of doing something wrong and having to do it over is exponentially more expensive. And not getting the help and doing something bad, then you just look stupid. And you're writing a book for credibility. So the last thing you want is to look stupid. So get help. The next problem I find that people have are stories. They don't have stories. You know, why are stories important? Because people learn from stories and they remember your points. You know, otherwise you just have like 10 commandments and you're done. You know, that fits on a business card piece of paper and sticks in your wallet. You know, that's not a book. You want people to remember your stories and remember your points, and they do that because of the stories. I remember 30 years ago, I was in a lunch meeting at the Public Relations Society of America, the New York chapter, and Bob Bly was giving a speech. And to this day, I remember the main points of his speech because of his story. He told the time when he was hired to write some copy, some advertising copy, direct mail copy, for a farmer who had a trainload full of apples that had been damaged by the hail. And, you know, these were perfectly good apples, except they had these little pockmarks from the hail. So if you go to a grocery store, you want perfect looking apples with a shine and no imperfections, you know, that's first rate. But there are plenty of people who will eat those apples with the hail marks because it's perfectly good apple. It just doesn't look quite as good as the other apple. So that's what Bob Bly told us. And his solution was to write copy that said, these apples are so fresh, they bear the scars of nature, to prove that they were actually out in the wild. Now, I remember that story 25, 30 years later. You know, that's the power of a story. So people remember those things. Secondly, books without stories are boring. And if you want people to finish your book, you want to be interesting. So you put stories in there. I had a client who wrote a book about communications, really great guy, and it was a good book about communications, but it had no stories. And you know, it read like a textbook. It was boring, it was dry, it was hard to read from one page to the next. So I said, you need to put in some stories. And he said, well, I don't like telling stories. And I said, well, if you don't like telling stories, but if you did like telling stories, what story would you tell? That's a Tony Robbins technique, by the way. He said, well, when I was director of publicity for Simon & Schuster, I got the order to promote this new series of books by this hot author from London, and I assigned it to one of my direct reports, and I trained her on how to do it. And she went on this cross-country tour with the author, and the book became a big success. And I was very happy that I mentored her. I said, "Oh, that's a pretty decent story. It shows you're a good coach. You share responsibility. You teach people. By the way, what was the name of the author in the book?" And she said, "Oh, the book series was called Harry Potter, and the author was J.K. Rowling." That became the foreword to his book because instantly he gave the publishing story of the decade to someone else instead of doing it himself and taking all the credit and all the glory for himself. So doesn't that position him as a wonderful boss who promotes women and gives them more than equal chance to get ahead in the world? Great story. It made the book. So that's why you want to have stories. And frankly, don't you like that person now that I just told you that story about? Sure you do. Because stories help people get to know, like, and trust you, so they want to hire you. And frankly, if we continue with the story brand, great books, the story brand, you should read it. People read books. Here's their model. People read books to get to know, like, and trust you. We all know that part. So they can see that you are the guru who can lead them from mess to success because you've done it with other clients and make them look like the hero. So in this story that I told you, the guy who told the story, he wasn't the hero. His PR person was the hero. The person who he mentored was the hero, you know? So it all worked out well. It was a win-win for everyone. And that's the power of a good story. Next problem, no deadline. You know, when I started doing book coaching and consulting and developmental editing, I tried to be a nice guy. I basically said, here's my fee. You can use me forever. So if you get sick, if someone visits, if the inevitable happens, if you need to take time off, you go on vacation, life happens, no problem. I'm here for you all the way, no matter how long it takes. That was a disservice to me and it was a disservice to them. I've known people who've been writing a book for 3 years, you know, because they put it off, they try to make it perfect, whatever. It just takes forever. And I've interviewed many people on my podcast for this, you know, people just like you, speakers, authors, coaches, consultants, who want to write a book, but were afraid to write a book. And now I'm interviewing them rather, and they're sharing their tips and ideas on how they overcame those issues and wrote their book. So they say it took them 3 years to write the first book, but the second book they wrote in 6 months because now they knew what they could do. So I would firmly suggest you set mini goals, and that way you'll finish your book. The final point I want to raise here is that they have no driving force. I once led a seminar, a birds of a feather seminar for a consulting group on book writing. And there was one guy in the group who had read my book, loved my book, referred people to me because he read my book, but he had not written a book. And I said, why don't you write a book? And you know, he said, I don't know why I would really need one. There are many reasons why you need to write a book, but if you don't have that driving force or a compelling reason to write a book, then you won't start the book or finish the book. So if you want to leave a legacy for people, if you want to help people, that could be your driving force. If you want to get more clients, more leads, more prospects, that can be your driving force. If you want to raise your rates and make more money, that could be your driving force. Doesn't matter to you what your driving force is. It matters to you what your driving force is. I mean, my driving force is that I want to show everyone in my college class that I'm a success. So I've written books. So, yeah.
There are other problems you could have when writing books too. You can watch any of these other videos to find out how you can write your book in a flash.